Hive went to Paraguay, where there's even a greater amount, and we're building these big data centers. It will be the stepping stone. The Bitcoin miners are the pioneers for AI. And why is AI so important? Because the big military spending in Europe needs AI data centers. They need them here because a lot of the weaponry is going to be autonomous. Autonomous cars, that's all we think of. No, it's going to be humanoids by Tesla. It's going to be autonomous tanks, autonomous submarines, but they all need AI data centers. So who are the pioneers? Are Bitcoin mine data centers. And what you could see is the data centers in America all of a sudden being all converted to AI data centers and no Bitcoin mining. That's what you could see because they've been able to source that.
I think the point that you mentioned about how we are financing this AI expansion is quite interesting, because if you're taking a lot of debt right now, when you know that it's going to take long, it's going to be super expensive, you're not going to be able to serve your debt. So you should kind of work on a shoestring with what you can do right now to get to a stage where your valuation is much higher. And I have to say that I think that the major bank in the US obviously are covering miners. They start to get the value. Maybe the industry is still quite undervalued because, it's not like a switch of a button, but I think there's been a kind of a reassessing of the industry. So eventually the value will come up. Welcome back to the Financial Fox. I'm your host, Steffi, and today on the show I have invited Frank Holmes. Frank is the CEO and the Chief Investment Officer at US Global Investors, and also is the Executive Chairman of Hive Digital Technologies, ticker Hive. Remember that because Frank is going to be talking about all sorts of things that you need to watch out for the new year ahead, the main trends, but also is going to talk about why and how Hive is different from many other Bitcoin miners. Now, Bitcoin miners are becoming key player in the digital infrastructure of the future, especially because they are AI operators and they have connection to the grid, they use energy. They are an industry that's still very undervalued, but with the AI future, very soon the evaluation is going to change as many investment analysts now are looking at the sector in a different way. So anyway, we talk about all sorts of things, and definitely this is a conversation that you need to watch. Before we get into the interview, I want to say a couple of things. First of all, a big thank you to Hive Digital Technologies for supporting the show. Hive is a pioneer in sustainable Bitcoin mining and AI digital infrastructure. They will be scaling all this year past 25 exahash of mining capacity and continue expanding renewable powered infrastructure while building the next generation of AI data centers. Hive is listed on NASDAQ, ticker is Hive, but they are also listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange and the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, and now the Colombia Stock Exchange as well, as they are emerging as a major player in the Latin American fast-growing digital infrastructure landscape. Financial Fox is partnering with the BTC Prague, which is one of the major Bitcoin events in Europe that is happening in June 2026. So we have got a special discount if you use the code FOX. So go and get your ticket, use the code FOX and grab your place, and I will see you at the event next year. Second things that I really need you to support me with is give it a like, give it a subscribe to our channel. If you're watching our content, having your support is so crucial for us to grow the channel so we can educate more people about Bitcoin. Finally, remember that the content on the show is for informational purposes only and not intended as financial advice. Any opinion expressed by me or my guests are ours alone, and you should not act solely on the back of them. As always, do your own research, level up your skills, and be accountable for your own decisions. Remember, any investment is risky and you need to know what you are doing. We are not financial advisors. With that being said, let's get into my interview with Frank. Hi Frank, how are you?
Outstanding.
Fantastic. We have this tradition to get you on the show before Christmas and to kind of look at the prediction for the year ahead. You are pretty good with that as you have been in the market for quite some time. And also I think you have the eye to kind of be very forward-thinking leader. So I always make sure that I get you on the show before the year's end so you can share your wisdom and your insight.
Well, you're so kind. Thank you. We do publish what's called the Investor Alert, and I have a Frank Talk blog, and it goes out every Friday, and it's about 100,000 readers in 80 countries. So it's at usfunds.com, and I'm a money manager. When I was trying to launch a Bitcoin ETF in 2017, I realized it wasn't going to happen because of KYC AML concerns. So being a Bitcoin miner, you have the virgin coin, so you don't have that problem. So that led to the creation of Hive, and where I put up the first $5 million to get the idea going. So I co-invested with another young man from Zug, and that was the genesis of it. So I remain that in this journey of knowing the world of gold, I write about every week, and I write about crypto, and I write about luxury goods, because I believe that they're all related. If you have a Birka bag and there's a limited supply, the market that Hermes has created by limiting supply is much higher than you can buy at the store. Bitcoin is capped at 21 million coins. Gold mining is very expensive and difficult to find new sources of gold, so the supply is limited. Whereas money supply and fiat is growing much faster than GDPs are growing. And that makes goods like luxury bags valuable. That makes alternative assets like Bitcoin and gold valuable. And we're seeing silver coins, and we're seeing this year is the last year that the US government will print 1 penny, the metal penny. So it's gone. So if you can buy the last vintage of pennies, in 10 years from now, they'll be worth much more than a penny. So it's the concept of understanding scarcity, and that's what makes Bitcoin so special, in addition to gold or silver and now pennies.
Interesting. I want to put a link of your weekly newsletter into the description of the video and also share it on social, because I think the insights that you bring are very interesting. Now, let's talk about the Bitcoin price and the 4-year cycle that many people are saying is finished. I think it was Fidelity Investment that recently said there is no 4-year cycle anymore. And that's what many Bitcoiners are saying, obviously talking their own book. But tell me, what do you think? Is there a reason why we should believe that there will always be a 4-year cycle? And if not, how has changed, maybe?
I think the adoption has proven out that it ran to 124,000. And then many of these new instruments came out where there was much more speculative calls. You can see the premium on options is very high. So that led to another ETF called BTCI, and it sells a call. So they say in Wall Street, the new Viagra of Wall Street is volatility. So they sell calls against it, and it's a great product because some of the crypto mining companies were doing covered writing to get more on their hodl position, generating more income. And what we've seen now is a sort of proliferation of trading around Bitcoin, and it's just going through a normal cycle. We saw this with GLD in 2003-4 when it first came out, that it morphed the value of the gold stocks, and then GLD, which is for gold, it started to grow, and it's become the go-to for bullion people in the U.S. financial markets. Well, this bullion ETF grew in Australia, the UK, Japan, all these countries around the world. So we're in that similar wave of Bitcoin. ETFs are there, and then you've got the income ones, and we're going to get this mutation, will you call it, in that 4-year cycle, but it will generally come back as these new coins get absorbed, and I remain pretty constructively bullish. You have to go study the world of gold and gold ETFs and gold stock ETFs to understand what's happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, very interesting. Do you have like a price prediction for Bitcoin for 2026?
It's hard to say what's going to happen in that time period. And I think it relates a lot to the global money printing. And that's the big thesis I try to explain to people. This century, gold has outperformed the S&P by 2 to 1. This century, governments have started using MMT, modern monetary theory, to pump up their economies and destroy the value of fiat. So it's just a race to lower the depreciation. Some countries do it faster, like Turkey's done it, or disasters like Lebanon and Venezuela. But basically, all the countries are printing money faster than they can run their GDP. And that makes the value of scarcity assets like gold and particular Bitcoin more valuable. And I don't think that's going away. Now, when I look at the whole world, the total debt is $350 trillion, more than 3 times the GDP of the world. And governments are now dropping interest rates globally. Some of them have negative real interest rates. So they're going to just have currency devaluation on a big picture. The issue that I have is that too many people are jumping into Bitcoin to get rich in the next 90 days. And that's not how it works. The valuation of my Warhol art doesn't go up in 90 days. Other classic arts don't go up. Gold and silver, they don't. My wealth has not been created in 90 days. But you had a lot of young people coming in saying, get rich with it. Gold is preservation of wealth. Bitcoin is preservation of wealth with a faster torque. It has a faster growth cycle. And there's other demographic reasons for that. But it's not overnight to get rich. And that's what creates these more volatile moves that take place in the capital markets. But I really, truly remain bullish on Bitcoin, and it's going through an unexpected correction for most of everyone thought it was perfect. Every 24 hours, sun comes up, sun goes down, moon comes up, moon comes down. So every 4 years, this is how much Bitcoin's going to go up and go down. It's not going to happen that way because you have the advent of ETFs, and then you have the adoption of different countries to it. So they start to change the fund flows. But it doesn't mean that the game is over. No, it doesn't mean that governments are going to stop printing money faster than they can get their productivity of GDP up. So these asset classes are so valuable.
It's very interesting what you mentioned about actually maybe the price being a bit depressed because, there are a lot of Bitcoins, they are coming to market from the previous, the investor that has been holding for many, many years. And now this supply need to be absorbed, right? So we need more adoption at the same time. Now, I want to come to the Bitcoin treasury companies, or if we should use this label, if we should, maybe we shouldn't, they're just companies, but I'm just referring to companies like, Strategy, they are hoovering up all this Bitcoin while, there are moments of, let's say, higher volatility. Are you worried about that and maybe this centralization of Bitcoin?
No, not unless they get convertible debts that hurt them. A year ago, Hive was under pressure because it was a proxy, and we didn't do a convertible debt to buy Bitcoin. Our peers all did, and they paid much higher prices. We know that, and so maybe someone's going to get into this trouble there. But I think there's been some real geniuses of what Michael Saylor's done. Not only a champion of it, but he used AI. As he explained to a group of CEOs at the Vegas Bitcoin conference, he spent hours using it to create a new preferred. And Wall Street told him, you can't do that. And you can't do it from a legal point of view, you can't do it from an accounting point of view. And he went and pulled up the laws and the regulations, and he created a paper, gave it to the lawyers, said do it, and then went out and raised $750 million. So he's done with innovation and using AI 3 types of unique pieces of paper to buy more Bitcoin. And I think that that's really showing the genius of it. And naturally, the big banks come out and say, it's bad, all the reasons. The same big banks are just envy. And that they were the same ones that were saying Ethereum is bad, and then all of a sudden JP Morgan shows up. They're the biggest player in Ethereum. And that came up from litigation of they were using AWS to mine Ethereum. And we used to be the biggest player in that space as a public company. So we followed all that information, and we've seen it happen with Bitcoin until all of a sudden those big banks want to be able to do what Saylor's doing. They want to get the banking fees to be able to create these unique structures because he's led the charge. This is just normal competition like you have in European football. And sometimes you get hooligans show up, and you get these hooligans that show up in the capital markets that are saying NVIDIA is a scam and Michael Saylor is, and because they're short. And then they go out and they create all this negative news about the industry, and it's like the year 2000, a tech bubble, it's a crisis. I've seen this story. I'm a little older than most of these young investors, and I've lived through these sort of stories. But what's very different, and for your listeners, is that the year 2000 was really pushed by Y2K. There was this whole drama that planes would follow the sky, people would be stuck in elevators, so there was this tremendous overload, and then you had the internet being unleashed, and people were raising all this money for eyeballs. It's very different. Open Chat, Perplexity, Grok have people that write checks. This is a revenue difference. There's a huge difference in this cycle. And so what I have noticed is that the AI attack that happened in the end of October, all this sort of negative storytelling was impacting also crypto. And everything was following basically NVIDIA. You can do quantitative math of when NVIDIA's down, what tech stocks are down. When NVIDIA's down 1%, what tech stocks are down 2%. You can see all of a sudden there was a clustering with Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining stocks, and you had companies coming out with their big converts to do AI. And so there's a sort of clustering negative scenario going through the correction. Bitfarms raises $500 million for getting into the AI business, and then you have a couple of other companies now raising billions of dollars to get the AI business. The AI business is so much more expensive. And where you live in the UK, Cambridge University's analytics team, they have a whole blockchain crypto, and their reports show that to build an AI data center, it's 30 times more expensive than a Bitcoin data center. So the amount of money that people are raising is not enough for what is going on. And so it creates all this turmoil of managing expectations. But what is real is that we are in a financial war, and that war is China versus the US. And China is pushing the BRICS countries not to own in their foreign currency any US dollars, to only own gold. So you've seen all these central banks get scared, and they've been buying a lot of gold. Right? And so we haven't seen that happen with Bitcoin as being the gold alternative with them, because the Bank of International Settlements, which basically controls over 60 central banks in the world out of Switzerland, they are okay with gold. They don't move the gold around, but they're still anti-Bitcoin in Europe. And you can see the narrative with countries which are very much influenced by the Bank of International Settlements. But they're now gold. So central banks are buying gold. And this all has to do with the weaponization of BRICS nations, which grew from 5 to like 15 names, etc. And that is a war. That is a real economic war. Who has really felt the pain? It's not been the US dollar as much, has been the euro in the trading. So these countries go and sell their commodities to China. China only will do it with yuan. Then they immediately Brazil converts their soybean sales to dollars right away. So they've really not impacted, but there is this push by China to attack it. We also know that China doesn't like Bitcoin. It attacks Bitcoin. And so we're going through this sort of choppy wave in this battle. What has also happened is that China, with its One Belt, One Road, has lent to more than 60% of the countries in the world money. And with that money comes covenants. Yes, I'll build you a seaport, but you've got to trade in Chinese yuan. You can't trade in other currencies. So you're now getting in 194 countries are members of the United Nations. Out of the 194 countries, 140 have borrowed money from China. And in this sort of the anti-Bitcoin gold scenario. And I try to tell young Bitcoiners, don't attack gold, because gold is the same as Bitcoin. It's a reserve. One's a digital reserve, one's a tangible reserve that you can wear also. They're both important in this financial battle around the world that's going on. And we're seeing it now play out, but we know in Europe the real tragedy is Russia with Ukraine, and that's where people are dying, and that's a real serious war. So Trump has pushed for NATO to spend more money. They have to go spend more money on protection because China keeps up with these cybersecurity attacks. They've attacked the power stations, they've done it with the telecom. There was recent assaults by them everyone knows the KG. Well, in China, it's the MS, and the MSS has not missiles with nuclear arms on them as much as they have kids out there attacking all your strategic military stations, your power stations, and trying to infiltrate. That's a real war. And you can look it up on open chat what they call Typhoon. The Volt Typhoon is just a classic of what's going on. I think that we're sort of so caught up with Bitcoin price day in, day out, you've got to step back and take a look at the big picture that governments are going to spend money faster than their GDP. They're all practicing MMT, modern monetary theory. This will long-term always do well for asset classes like gold and Bitcoin. Short-term, we're just going through the adoption process. We've had a heck of a run in a year. It's going through this correction, and it will then go to $250,000. I think by the time of Trump's office stay in the White House, gold could go to $7,000, and Bitcoin will be through $250,000. I really feel that when I see what's going on. But here's what's bullish for the Bitcoin miners is that the biggest AI spend in the world right now for data centers for AI is in Abilene, Texas. Stargate basically is a $500 billion spend. What is this facility in Abilene, Texas? There were Bitcoin miners. It was Bitcoin miners who pioneered and found the electricity that was sourced by solar, wind, and flare gas. And it was surplus. No electricity is being created. In were the pioneers, were the Bitcoin miners, Caruso, and they established that. And then you have Core Scientific, CoreWeave trying to take over Core Scientific because the Bitcoin miners found the stranded electricity. What did Hive do? Hive went to northern Sweden where they had surplus electricity. Then Hive went to Paraguay where there's even a greater amount, and we're building these big data centers. It will be the stepping stone. The Bitcoin miners are the pioneers for AI. And why is AI so important? Because the big military spending in Europe needs AI data centers. They need them here because a lot of the weaponry is going to be autonomous. Autonomous cars, that's all we think of. No, it's going to be humanoids by Tesla. It's going to be autonomous tanks, autonomous submarines. But they all need AI data centers. So who are the pioneers? Are Bitcoin mine data centers. And what you could see is the data centers in America all of a sudden being all converted to AI data centers and no Bitcoin mining. That's what you could see because they've been able to source that. But the spend is much bigger than anyone believes. And I know because we're the first to do it. We're the first to do hedging. We're the first to hedge electricity, and we're the first to take our AI chips, NVIDIA chips, to do AI from mining Ethereum. When Ethereum went away from proof of work to proof of stake, we pivoted, and now we have 10,000 customers renting our chips. And as we build out, and what you're seeing, something else has happened, is dynamic, is Putin invades Ukraine, and immediately electricity costs all over the world goes up. New Zealand has nothing to do, so far removed, electricity prices go up. Everyone becomes protectionist. Sweden, they doubled the tax on electricity. We saw Canada, moratorium, no more Bitcoin mining, and government approvals for any data centers. Well, this past year, the operative word has become sovereign. So they want to make sure that no one can come in and touch their data, and they're becoming protectionists and creating these sort of walls around their data centers in Canada, the US, Sweden. I can go any place, the concept. So we're seeing this sort of pressure coming on the value of sovereign data centers. So Hive immediately bought a Bitcoin data center in Toronto. It's small, but it's so powerful. People don't realize that 10 megawatts for Bitcoin mining and fill it with chips is only $10 million. But if that is going to be high performance computing, it's going to be $300 million. The numbers are mind boggling. So when we go and build out the infrastructure, what we're doing in Paraguay for high performance computing, it's much more complex. You need dark fiber. When we get an ASIC chip delivered, it takes 6 hours to unpackage it, plug it in, and start cash flowing. We get an NVIDIA chip, it's 6 weeks. Why? Because you're building a brain, and it's very complex, and many more moving parts. What I think the real undervalued proposition for investors are Bitcoin mining stocks. If you look at a pure data stock, they trade at 10 times revenue, 20, 25 times EBITDA. Bitcoin mining stocks, they are much cheaper, but that's the path. Electricity and the land and then the customer. Well, the customer's pent-up demand from Perplexity, from Claude, from Grok, from Open Chat. But the new big demand is military spending.
You touch on so many things like AI for defense. Then you talk about sovereign AI, which is also really important. And then you talk about the role of Bitcoin miners being able to convert the data center, not like that, but in a much faster and efficient way than hyperscalers. So obviously that places miners as, really big key player in the digital infrastructure of the future. Now, I also want to talk about AI in the space, because that has been kind of like hitting the headlines as many big tech companies announced the fact they want to build data center in the space. So is that happening? Is that real? And then I would be interested in perhaps our miner like Hive could participate into that.
Well, I think a lot of the people want to do it because it's a hot thing to do for the stock price. That's really what drives. If you look at Hive has the most stable executive team of all the miners. The turnover of CEOs, CFOs, and chairmen is unprecedented. They don't last long. And everyone's in there to get their stock up, and they're looking for the story. We're a technology company. We're the first to do an ASIC chip with Intel. And so we have a different vision. Not all crypto mining companies are equal. We have to just come down to that reality. And none are really pure green renewable energy that are public. And so we're different. And then that's great. That's what creates the interest. Like pasta is not one type. You get many different types and shapes of pasta. So that's what we have in this industry. Hive looks at it being that when you start with a ground floor building a data center, it's 3 years to 5 years of all the regulatory stuff you have to go through. But if you've already done that with Bitcoin mining, it can be done in 9 months. So that's what makes the Bitcoin miners a much more attractive proposition if you need So that data center only cost you $1 million a megawatt to build. Now you have to spend $10 million to upgrade. And a lot of it is air conditioning and bigger fiber because you use more electricity. It's a complete different electrical load. but you do have the electricity and you do have the shell infrastructure and you've had all the permits done. So that's what makes Bitcoin miners really attractive to buy out. That's the people going in the business. And if you look at the multiples, so Iris Energy and Cypher, they've all gone this path of getting getting hyperscalers to do contracts. If you look at the price, all they're offering really is the same price as a Bitcoin miner's revenue per kilowatt. It's approximately 14 cents per chip you have, but it's spread over 10 years. It's a long-term contract. So the stock market plays a bigger value on this sort of linear line of that you're going to have revenue. The upside that you get from Bitcoin mining running to $250,000, you're not going to get that. If you have your own HPC clients like Hive has done, then we do get that upside. That's the bigger difference.
Because you're not sharing the pie really. You are just growing as you were going to grow anyway.
Yes, and so that's been sort of the strategy we've used. But what we found is that our data centers in Canada are all of a sudden actually in New Brunswick much more valuable being converted to an HPC. And then when we first went on that journey, we realized that the government had not put in the fiber optics. So you can build a tier 3 data center, but if you don't have all the fiber optics built, you can't move the data. So while we're getting ready to build and convert, they're laying the cable so that by the time the construction's finished, the cable will be in place so that it'll become a huge monster. So that $70 million of 70 megawatts all of a sudden is going to be a $700 million spend. It's a much bigger spend, and so you have to how do you go about that process? Well, we have found for our other data centers, which we're doing with Bell Canada, Dell, D-E-L-L, finances the GPU chips that go in there, and they're immediately sold out. The revenue is much higher. In our own data center in Toronto, immediately we have people knocking on the door tomorrow that would take at not 14 cents. I'm talking much higher prices of revenue. So our path is different than some of the other fire chats I've listened to, what they're doing, etc. But whatever you look at it, you have to think of it's a much bigger spend, and the mechanics that fix a Jeep or a Bronco are very different than a Ferrari or a Bugatti. And when you start getting into these NVIDIA chips, I'll share with you and your listeners, it's a Bugatti you're driving. It's a Ferrari. It's the engineering and the wheel balancing and the engines and the mechanics is much more sensitive. And you just have to respect that. But what I think will happen over the next few years is that the Bitcoin mining data centers will go through a re-rating on the fact that they have electricity and land, and they're going to have to hire more technical people that know how to run GPU data centers. We're very fortunate because we're mining Ethereum early. We had this expertise with GPU chips.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And you have done it already because you have a dedicated AI subsidiary that is run by, Craig Tavares that specifically focus on the AI business. So you kind of line the foundation. I think the point that you mentioned about how are you financing this AI expansion is quite interesting, because if you're taking a lot of debt right now, when you know that it's going to take long, it's going to be super expensive, you're not going to be able to sell, to serve your debt. So you should kind of work on a shoestring with what you can do right now to get to a stage where your valuation is much higher. And I have to say that I think that the major bank in the US obviously are covering miners. They start to get the value. Maybe the industry is still quite undervalued because, it's not like a switch of a button. But I think there's been a kind of a reassessing of the industry. So eventually the value will come up.
So the big players look at the debt equity ratios. That's the real part of what the debt equity is. I think our only debt is fixed and it's very low, like a mortgage on a very small piece overall. It's like less than 5%. So we want to be very cautious this way unless we have immediate revenue and cash flow for it. But what's really exciting about Hive is that we hit we hit critical mass. 6 months ago, few believed that we would scale from 6 to 25 exahash. We made more EBITDA last quarter than all of last year after the halving. And so this quarter, like we just gave our production for November, but those numbers are up 182% from a year ago. They are up 8% month over month. This quarter is going to be huge when you look at the quants, just look at revenue growth and cash flow growth, because we now have these economies of scale because of the expansion in Paraguay. And positively, we're seeing a swing, like in the elections in Chile, from a communist party over to a conservative party, a pro-business party in politics. So the politics of Paraguay has always been pro-business. And you know the remarkable thing about the country, you won't believe this, but they did not have income taxes until 2009. And it's only 10%. Wouldn't you like to have only 10%, Steph, in taxes?
That's brilliant.
Yes, brilliant. And they're growing. They have very fertile land. One of the biggest eucalyptus tree growers is out of London. Has a hedge fund, like a private equity quasi-hedge fund. And they can grow the eucalyptus trees so quickly there, and they're used for their oils, etc., and they're exported. So it's a country that produces food for 60 million people, but the population is only 6 million. So they have surplus food, rich soil, and huge surplus electricity. And so the president really understands, I think, much better about the significance of Bitcoin mining to help build out their infrastructure. And now we have Rubio, the Secretary of State for America, going into a special joint venture with Paraguay for looking for global terrorists. And that means they're going to need more AI data centers. Well, who's the perfect party? Is Hive. And Hive will be there in that path. So I see Paraguay becoming like Switzerland is, landlocked in Europe, but becoming a unique digital economy outside of farming. And we think of Switzerland, cows and chocolate and dairy and cheese. Well, it's also financial sector. Their digital bank club, it's captured in 4 years, 40% of all the country have digital bank accounts. So it's an economy that's going to evolve, and I'm excited that Hive is positioned there. And the only way to fly there nonstop is really to go through Madrid. So you'd have to fly from England to Madrid, and then you can fly right to Asunción. It's just more. That's the hardest part, is flying there quickly. But once you're there, it's a safe country. You hardly see any graffiti. It's very rural. And so we just got listed last week in Bogota.
I was going to mention that. I was going to mention it.
And so we're the first to do that. We're the first data center and Bitcoin miner to get listed there. And there's a rational reason. My other products, my ETFs have been listed there. And now that we're the biggest player in Latin America in data centers and the largest consumer of electricity in Paraguay, what you find is that the locals in the South America, they can't buy stocks in NASDAQ or Canada. Their local Robinhood accounts are limited. But if you're listed there, then they can buy them. Well, the other big fact for us is that pension funds have to be able to show if you're listed in their exchange, then they can turn around and buy. And Chile has a very sophisticated pension fund group. So the same thing with Colombia and the same thing with Peru. The Colombian Stock Exchange has a partnership with NASDAQ, but also with Chile and with Peru. And so now all of a sudden we'll be listed in these other exchanges, and the pension funds, if they want to get into the AI business, the data center business, Hive is the natural proxy.
Yeah, there is not really any other Bitcoin miner or AI operator that is in Latin America. So you are kind of taking that position now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
very interesting. Very interesting.
We are embracing the culture of Latin America, and we're embracing the growth opportunities. And Rubio says that Paraguay can be the data center for AI capital in Latin America. But really important is yesterday was the announcement of a special military surveillance system. Well, you're going to need AI to do that. Anything in Europe is going to have to do it. Now, here's the big opportunities that you're going to see in Europe. is you just look at NVIDIA's sales, like who's buying the H100s? Well, Europe is 50% say is America. Europe is 5%. Well, they should be population-wise close to America. And Canada is only 2%. Well, Canada should be about 5% of NVIDIA's because the population is 1 to 10 and the GDP numbers. So if you look at the conversion and the opportunities for AI in Europe and the government spending all this military NATO money is going to have to, if they want to do AI with their tanks and etc., that there's a huge boom going to be in data centers with AI in Europe. And there's a big boom for Canada. And so I think that this sell-off is a short-term buying opportunity. It's saying, oh, they're too overvalued, it's all over, it's like Y2K. It's not so. It's just a healthy bull market correction in a super cycle of spending. Fiat currencies are going to slowly devalue, but the big difference is that the money is now going to be for national security, and national security is going to need AI data centers. And that's what makes me so bullish on crypto miners are so inexpensive as a whole relative to pure just data centers.
So basically Europe remains a core strategic region for Hive.
Yes.
Because of these reasons. So, I mean, I cannot think of many AI data center in Europe out of the one that, I mean, obviously I know the one that you have in Sweden, but there aren't really many operators in Europe.
No. And I think the other part was that in Europe, they looked at data centers as an expense. In America, it is a revenue generation line item. Very, very different. But this is now starting to show up in Canada. Financial institutions, the biggest is the Royal Bank of Canada buying NVIDIA chips. The CEO of the Royal Bank of Canada phones Jensen, the head of NVIDIA. They talk to each other. So they know that AI and these data centers is going to improve their revenue and their margins. So this will slowly come into Europe, that they will have to be competitive, and besides national security.
Very interesting. Well, it seems like that you are going to have a very busy 2026 ahead. Anything else that you are excited about that you want to mention as we close the end of the year?
I think one of the things I started was a gold ETF.
Yeah.
It's called GoAU. Go Gold.
Go Gold.
Go Gold. And it focused on the royalty companies because I was the first company I ever took public was a royalty company. And then I followed with fascination what Tether is doing. And Tether not only is the 500 million wallets around the world with their stable coin buying US dollars, they are big buyers of gold. And they're also big buyers of gold royalty companies. So yes. What I'm trying to explain is that for the crypto person that's out there, that I'm only Bitcoin, sell all your gold and bank and just buy Bitcoin, they're missing the bigger equation. I think that Tether is a very smart group that recognize, which we've done. We're the first to have a ETF focus on the gold royalty companies, and it's up 100%. So it's done really well this past year, and the companies are doing well, and it's quant rebalancing. So I really think that investors they should be focused on what is Tether doing from a strategy point of view. And what are they doing to make their interoperability of their stable coin Tether with the US government wants to also have a stable coin so that they'll be able to be interoperable. Well, when you look at the stock market, the biggest thing you look at is how much money market fund cash there is. I think in the US it hit a record last week of 8 trillion. So there's lots of cash to go into the stock market. Tether is growing, and all the emerging market countries are feeding into the mechanism of US dollars, and it's a big buying potential for gold and for other crypto mining and gold royalty companies. So it's recognizing where these big pools of cash are and where they are. So people are so quick to be negative. How can you be negative when every emerging country is showing you that they want US dollars because they're buying Tether? And Tether says, we're going to earn less money if rates fall in the US, So our balance is gold. So they're so strategic. So investors follow what Tether's doing and sit back at 50,000 and see how the world is turning.
Okay, what's your thought about Tether Gold? Because obviously they have a product that get exposure to gold, but it's kind of hard to pick. I mean, they're not picking up as much as their other product, USDT. So what's happening with Tether Gold in your view?
Tether Gold has been one of the biggest buyers of bullion. There's been more money now going into Tether Gold globally than there's been going into the bullion ETFs. So our gold analysts here, they track the flows of gold Tether. They follow the flows of ETFs that are just bullion because the stocks all follow bullion. So people follow Bitcoin ETFs now. They can see the flows going into that. Helps you understand the direction of where the commodity price is going. And so I think it's important that the more sophisticated gold investor is looking at the flows of Tether's gold asset.
Yeah, interesting. Also, I wonder whether China, based on what you said before, if there is some kind of, they are kind of looking at Tether Gold as well. But obviously Tether is investing in AI as well. So I agree, it's very interesting what they are doing because they are kind of building an interconnected ecosystem.
But it's what Tether is investing in, but it's also what their clients are investing in. And so their clients are putting money into their gold product and they're putting money into the US dollar. So your hedge is, I want to have dollars for national security and I want to have gold if rates go negative because then gold will go up. So I'm always hedged. It's a hedged trade. And gold is always the preservation of wealth, and the US dollar is the most powerful currency for trade. It's also fungible, so US dollars can be anywhere. Can't do that. When I go to, recently in Colombia and in Paraguay, no one's running around with Chinese yen. Renminbi, or Japanese yen or euros. They want US dollars. And if they don't have US dollars cash, then they want Tether.
Yeah.
Do you see that? And so it's recognizing the big flows. And so I think they've done a wonderful job of smarter investors recognizing the combination of owning Bitcoin. They're big miners of Bitcoin. Their vision is to go to 100. Well, companies in the US get out of Bitcoin mining to go into AI. Tether's expanding their Bitcoin infrastructure. And so are we. So we're being contrarian to where the other companies are going.
But that's what you need to do. You need to be contrarian, have conviction, and have discipline, and keep working, and eventually things will work out. I think, resilience is so much underestimated nowadays, actually not appreciated, because people just look at, headline, big numbers, but actually to get there, you need to do the work, and people don't like to do the work.
And Steph, I have other products that help me put my hands on the pulse of the world. So one of the things I realized was that for Hive is that the expensive chips are all done with airplane cargo. But when we buy containers from Bitmain, they come on ship. So I realized that 80% of all commodities and 80% of all finished products, like a refrigerator, a stove, a car, they're all put on ships. So I come out with my ETF C. And so C lets me monitor every day the global economy. It's booming still. All the negative news, it's booming. And then I have this product listed on the London Stock Exchange, and it's called TRIP.
TRIP, okay. What's TRIP?
It's airlines and airports and hotels, the more expensive hotels. Well, it's on a tear. Oil falls, they make big profit margin. So if everyone is so afraid of the global economy, they wouldn't be flying. The airlines are making a fortune. You know what it costs to fly to go to Spain or to Italy? The price has gone up over the past couple of years substantially.
Yeah.
And if you want to go last minute to go home to see family,
it's impossible. It's like, even a ticket to Italy, that if you buy now for the end of May, you will pay £500 to go to Milan. £500? It used to be like 80.
So your hedge is to own some TRIP.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're making all the money. And so I I look at the airline industry, and business travel is the big profit margin now for Delta and for United. And I flew to Japan over American Thanksgiving for a week. Every seat was taken, every seat. And expensive. And the other part was, I said, well, I want to use some of my points to upgrade. Oh, we put you on a wait list. You can't use them like before. Like you'd say, here's 250,000 points, or here's 50,000 points to go from economy to business class. Oh, you can't do that now. It's a 14-hour flight. You have to go on a wait list. So it's really fascinating to me to see, okay, well then don't get upset about it. Make an investment in it. If you think the prices are going up, they're making a lot of money, own trip. You got to own C, because it's telling you that the world is not falling apart.
Do you have Alitalia? You know, the Italian airline?
Yes.
Because I know, like, Italians either fly Ryanair or they fly with Alitalia. They kind of like, you know, they want to do Italian stuff. So I think it's been a company that probably has been doing quite well, just from exactly what you were saying. Interesting.
So by sharing with your listeners, by following see what the cargo ships are charging and doing and their stock prices and their high dividends, and then following what's happening in air travel, tells me stay bullish. The world's not coming to an end.
No, stay bullish. Frank, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was a great chat.
Thank you. Happy holidays.